What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Sports Weekly podcast. I'm your host, Christian Royston, joined by my co-host, Logan Shanks. We're going to start this off recapping the final regular season game, Kansas State, 42-35 win. Honestly, I don't think we were expecting a win there, but, no. I mean, a win's a win, right?
I mean, all in staff picks, we all picked them to lose. So yes. I believe you ended up on the positive side of 500 there, which
I think I ended at 500.
At 500. So give yourself a little pat on the back for that. I'm not sure how last season went for you, but start off by saying that I did predict the exact record for the final season, not exactly per game, but I predicted them to go 7-5, and that is what they finished at in the regular season. But that's besides the point. I'll stop giving myself the much needed praise. But anyway, great game to watch, especially for us driving down there, a little bumpy on the roads as the snow was coming down in Kansas. But overall, a great way for Iowa State to end the regular season, and just a fun time driving down there to Manhattan and enjoying Snowmageddon, as it is now being called.
Mm-hmm. I think the snow was, definitely a surprise when we were going down, but honestly, a good surprise. It ended up being a pretty solid game, especially, they went to the ground a lot more. We'll talk a good amount about Abu Sama, of course. But yeah, just the snow itself just made for a really interesting game, and honestly, probably the most exciting game of the season.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, you talk about just the explosive plays. It looked like it was coming every drive. There was going to be at least a play for over 30. The touchdowns were all for over 60 yards. I mean, that's just, or at least besides one of them from Higgins. 33. But I mean, it was just crazy. You'd start out the game with that first carry from Abu Sama going all the way to the house, 66 yards.
71 was his first.
It was crazy. I mean, you just didn't expect that. I mean, Iowa State was shorthanded with Eli Sanders and Cartavius Norton not making the trip, which we'll talk about more of that later. But, you can blame the snow for some of the tackling issues from Kansas State, but I think you really just saw the explosiveness that Abu Sama has had all season, and with him being the feature back in this game, you just saw what he's going to be able to, hopefully, for Iowa State do in this bowl game, and then for the rest of his time at Iowa State.
Mm-hmm. It was a pleasant surprise. I think we did know he had this big play potential, as most of his really good runs were on just big plays where he's just making people miss. And then to have that Breece Hall-esque run to start the game like Hall did 2 years ago in Manhattan, I think it just really proved that he can be the lead back. And I'm not going to say that like Norton and Sanders were kind of holding him back, taking his reps, but his first game as a starter, he breaks history.
Yeah, and, again, the snow definitely has some part of it. I mean, and but you also have to look, he's bouncing off tackles. He's taking one up the middle. He takes one over on the sideline. I mean, I'm not going to lie. Every time he broke off a run, at least in that first half, we looked at each other again. This is happening again. And I expected there to be a holding call, because not that this offensive line is, giving up a lot of holding calls or penalties in general, but you just had to think that someone was, holding on to someone a little bit too long, or a legal man downfield, whatever the case was. But honestly, that first run I went back and looked at it this morning, the combo block from Steve-O Klotz and Ben Bramer, and then just you see them from the Eagles' point of view, see them cheering when he's 10 yards out on that first play of the game. I mean, that was just awesome to see. And, you just really saw this young team kind of culminate, and just with a big upset win on the road. And I mean, it was just, again, like a great game, probably the most exciting game that I've ever watched from Iowa State in terms of, being underdogs on the road and just in a great atmosphere in general.
Yeah, once Abu kind of settled down there for a bit, it started getting into like a shootout between, it was just score for score at that point, and that's when we were like, oh, this game's actually getting pretty good. Yeah. It's not just the Sama game, it's Iowa State is competing with one of the top teams in the Big 12, which was good to see, especially with how young this team is. It shows that their offense can actually be pretty good when it's putting it all together.
And a big stat to look at is that, Iowa State they had 32 plays on offense
35.
35 plays on offense. Kansas State had over 100.
Yeah.
The defense gave up almost 500 yards, or I believe whatever
it was like 497 on 102 plays.
And you win the game. They scored the last 2 touchdowns to win the game, and that's just crazy. I just did not expect this out of this young team. This is something we had not seen from them all year, to go shot for shot, score for score against, especially a top 25 opponent. So, and like I said, Kansas State's offense was doing great. Like, they were doing a lot of good things. The passing game wasn't, amazing, but they found their way across. Their drives were always super long when they would score touchdowns. So, just a shootout, and something that, like I said, we never really seen from this team. And I think that should carry over into this bowl game, which will, you'll finally be able to see what this Iowa State offense is capable of with a really consistent run game that they just really have not had all season. And I don't think it's I don't think it's Eli and Cartavius Norton's fault at all.
No, I think it's just I guess it's the offensive line is young, that's for sure. I think Sanders and Norton are talented, but not on the level that Sama has the potential to be.
He
kind of flashed his potential in that last game.
Neither of them have had games like that. Neither of them have had games like what he had against BYU.
Yeah. I think Norton kind of flashed some of that potential last year, but I think injuries have kind of, settled him down a bit. I think he runs safer. And I think Sanders is just maybe more of a just every down back. He's not the big play back. He'll pick up like a 12-yard carry if he needs to, but he's not somebody that's going to rip off back-to-back 70-yard touchdowns.
I really wanted to see them use Sanders more in the horizontal game because I think he had some good carries that way, but with him being an every down back, I think they just tried him too many times just up the middle, simple stuff like that, and it just didn't really work.
Yeah.
But you saw that work with Sama in this game, and the blocking was working, and this is against a Kansas State team that they've had a pretty solid defense. It was right there neck and neck with Iowa State throughout the entire season.
Yeah, I think Sama succeeded just because he showed kind of what he brings. He is super shifty. He makes really quick cuts, but he also has, you told me yourself, he just has the eyes of an elite runner. His ability just to read the defense and find holes is just amazing.
Read defenses while the play is going on. Like, he'll follow the offensive line, and if there's, instead of following the offensive line, he'll see a hole and just go that way. And by the time the defense realizes that he's gone through that open hole, at least in this game, it was too late to catch him. And there was even some times where you saw how hard it was to tackle him in the snow because I think it was his second touchdown or whatever it was. A guy tried to push him down, and Abu Sama just bounced off of him.
Almost pushed him forward.
Yeah. So, that was just crazy. Abu Sama rightfully deserves that Big 12 Newcomer of the Year, or Big 12 Newcomer of the Week, and Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week. And, with the awards coming out later, or should be coming out later this week, we'll see if he finds himself into that category. But, you've seen more of the historical side of what kind of records he's broken.
Yeah. And I think you talk about new, freshman of the year type things. I think he's probably not sitting in that yet just because he hasn't played enough snaps. It would have been nice to see him perform even half this well in more games as opposed to just having half of his yards in this one game. But, we'll do a little segment called Let's Look at all the records that Sama broke. He ran for 276 yards and 3 touchdowns, which is the most rushing yards by a freshman ever and the most rushing yards in a road game ever. So he set the 4th most rushing yard total of all time by any Iowa State runner.
Gotcha.
Which is crazy.
Considering the amount of talent they've had the last, 5, 6, 7 years, whatever it is, since Matt Campbell's been here.
And then his 2 70-yard rushes, I know they said this during the game, but the last player who's actually had 2 70-yard touchdowns in a game was Adrian Peterson.
That is right. I remember you told me that in the office on Monday, and that's crazy.
2005 in Oklahoma. That's almost 20 years.
Yeah, no, that's, and you got to think about the amount of talent that any collegiate program has had. I mean, you look at guys
that is in the Big 12.
Yeah.
But still, there's been a lot of good runners in the Big 12.
I mean, you'd think, gosh, like maybe Derrick Henry can rip off a couple of those against a non-con team, but
I mean, he possibly did. And then there's just so many. There were only, let's see, Breece Hall was one of the only ones to have multiple 50-yard runs in a game.
Mm-hmm.
And it was Breece Hall and Troy Davis, obviously two of the best running backs at Iowa State of all time.
Yeah,
and now Sama's in that category as well.
Yeah, I mean, that you're talking about two guys that are two probably the best players at Iowa State. Troy Davis, both those guys, Heisman. I don't know if I want to say finalists, but I mean, I want to say they were both top 10. I think Breece Hall, that 1 year that he popped up, but both of his last 2 years. But I think it was, the Fiesta Bowl year, I want to say he was 8th. He finished 8th in Heisman voting, and Troy Davis had to be up there as well. But yeah, I mean, he's in good company with those two. And, I think this isn't, maybe it will be. That'd blow my mind. But if this is probably going to be an outlier game from Sama, I don't know if he's going to rush for over 200 every game. But you've just seen his big playability and his ability, like I said, to scan the field and kind of look to see what the offensive line is giving him. And I think whether he's proven himself as the starter and as that true, versatile running back that can do both. I've talked about a lot on this podcast. You need the running back that can run both horizontal and right up the middle. And he proved that in this game against Kansas State. And very exciting game to watch.
Yeah, and it was, I don't want to say it was expected. We kind of assumed he was going to have a good game at some point, just especially after we saw the state title game last year where he ripped off 6 touchdowns in that win. Yeah, so I mean, this is something that people knew that he had this talent, and I think we were all just kind of waiting to see when he would start producing or when he got the opportunity to.
And looking at Troy Davis, sorry for all the Cyclone alumni that are screaming at me for not knowing this, but Troy Davis was actually 5th in Heisman voting in 1995 and then 2nd in 1996.
Yes, and 96 was the year that he had the multiple rushes in a single game of over 50 yards.
2,100 yards and 21 rushing touchdowns.
Yes, so if Sama, trends in the right direction, if he sits among elite company like Troy Davis and Breece Hall, I mean, I think Iowa State's in for a really good player. And especially, I don't mean to cut you off, but especially he's a Des Moines native. So, I don't want to assume that he's going to stay here and not enter the transfer portal, but it would be good to see him stay loyal to, a school that's close by.
Yeah, I think all the signs are pointing to him staying here. Like you said, Des Moines native, Iowa guy, I'm assuming all of his family is here, and just, the state's going to love him. He broke a ton of records in that high school championship game last year. So for him to be able to do that, and then in the last regular season game of this year, break a ton of collegiate records, I mean, you got to think that he's just wanting to see what he can do at Iowa State. And you were kind of waiting for these last 2 years, really, to have that another feature back to come out of Iowa State. It seems like Matt Campbell has been great with that. If you want to look back at his Toledo days, worked with Kareem Hunt, who was amazing. And then, you just go from David Montgomery to Breece Hall. Abu Sama could be next up for the Cyclones.
Yeah, and we kind of thought they would be the case with Jairell Brock last year. Obviously, that did not turn out. But, yeah, going forward, Abu is very clearly the number one guy right now. I mean, I think going into next year, obviously they have some good commits coming in, and they still have Carson Hansen, who's been, pretty talented and the very limited reps he's had. So I think you put Sama in that lead back role, and you just kind of see what happens next year.
Yeah, and I think Hansen has been great in the passing game. He's gotten a couple big catches, and I've described him more as the bowling ball running back because it seems like he's a little bit bigger and that you might just be able to put him in there maybe for a goal line push or just see what he's got out there. I think he could truck some kids.
Yeah, he's actually shifty too.
Yeah, so, and he was in on kick returns. So that was interesting to see. Another guy that's consistently been in on kick returns is Jalen Knoll, who had himself a game as well with his second game in the last 3 games with 2 receiving touchdowns.
Yeah, don't let the Abu Sama game just distract you from the fact that the passing game also, during that like second half, was incredible. Just especially with Noel. Noel was just on fire.
And they needed that because, like we said, Kansas State was not backing down on home turf. And both him and Higgins stepped up in big ways. Noel really more often, but yeah, if we want to look at his stats real quick, I know that 82-yard touchdown, which was actually ended up being the game-winning touchdown, kind of scared some Iowa State fans because you see him tread that sideline. I mean, it was on the other side of the field for us. I thought he was going to get called out of bounds, whistle blown, but I went back and watched it. He clearly stays in, and an amazing run and a shifty move from him and a great block by Bramer to get him into that open space and just dust the Wildcats.
Campbell actually talked about that after the game. He was on the sideline right next to Noel. He saw Noel do his little cut there, and it was obviously like a 3rd and long play. He's like, "Oh, come on, Noel, let's go for the first down." But then I don't think he can complain once he saw the result of that.
Oh yeah, no, and I agreed with him. When he caught that ball, I thought I didn't think he was going to get the first down. It was on 3rd and 15, and I couldn't have tweeted out better. He needed 15, and he decided to get 82 big ones all the way to the house for his second touchdown of the game, and 3 catches, 160 yards, and 2 touchdowns. That first touchdown came on, it was a really similar catch to when he had that touchdown with Becht in the Oklahoma game, where it was just in stride, and he just took it all the way.
Nice throw, nice catch.
Yeah, you forget how he's a fast guy when you give him the chance in open space. And I wouldn't say that. We saw it in this Kansas State game that he is shifty, but if you just give him the ball in stride, it's almost like a guaranteed touchdown for him.
There's a reason that he's on the kick return team. He can honestly just like find a way to the end zone.
Yeah,
and obviously his stat line, when you were saying it, kind of reminded me of that Randy Moss stat line. 3 catches, 3 touchdowns.
And I think that might have been a Thanksgiving game as well. And this was, Saturday after Thanksgiving. So,
yeah.
Jalen Noel might be the next Randy Moss. Hot take? I don't know.
Might need to see a little more from him.
Maybe a little bit more if he comes back to Iowa State next year, which...
That's true.
We will find out.
And, not only did Noel have a good game, Becht, I actually didn't know he only completed 8 passes. I thought it was more.
First half was rough.
Yeah, but still 8 passes for 230 yards. And Jaden Higgins actually had back-to-back catches there for a touchdown.
And he was quiet before it was that drive. It was really the Jaden Higgins drive. He had a 22 catch on a 3rd down, and then on 1st down over towards the sideline, you get a perfectly placed ball by Becht just over a Kansas State defensive back, right into the hands of Jaden Higgins. And that's what tied the game. And then that 82-yard touchdown from Noel ends up being the game-winning touchdown.
Game-winning.
And that Jalen Noel touchdown was with 8 minutes left. I for sure thought that Kansas State was going to go down and score again because they've been having their way with the Iowa State defense, which at times looked solid, but there were some big plays that they gave up as per usual. But, if we want to talk more about Becht's game, just efficient in that second half, found his guys, and again, they just a ton of big plays from the receiving game in that second half.
Yeah, they went to him 12 times the entire game, and they only really needed to go to him 12 times.
Yeah.
Which is, obviously the weather conditions aren't ideal for throwing the ball, so it was nice to see that, obviously with the ground game doing as well as it is, or was, that whenever they needed to go to the air, it worked pretty much every time, 8 out of 12 times.
And that's what you did not want to see, is for one of those 12 times for Becht to throw an interception, or this is still, again, a young quarterback, still learning every game. You did not want to see him throw an interception at any point in that game, especially with what it was looking like, the shootout. And again, they didn't have to look at Chase Contreras at all. It was all touchdowns. It was
Yeah.
crazy. But Beck, certainly just having a great stretch this second half of the season. Some growing pains, but to end the regular season on a note like that, 8 of 12, 230 yards and 3 touchdowns, getting to 20 touchdowns.
Yeah, I was going to say.
In 12 games. And I said I wanted him to get to the 20 touchdown mark and under 10 interceptions. And if in the bowl game, I would be very surprised if he throws, what's he at now? 7? If he throws
8.
Up to 8, if he throws 2 interceptions in the bowl game, I'd be kind of surprised depending on who they play. But again, Beck just looking a lot better. Mm-hmm. I have full trust in him that next season we're only going to see things get better for him based off of this game alone, honestly.
Mm-hmm. And, I mean, we've been talking about his efficiency all year, and this was just another game that just highlighted how efficient he is. Mm-hmm. Making good decisions, good throws, honestly. I mean, some of those balls were just placed exactly where they needed to be. Mm-hmm. And keeping the ball safe, which obviously has been, it's cropped up a few times, but obviously not as much as it has in the past with other quarterbacks. So, I mean, it is nice to see somebody who's actually keeping the ball safe.
Right. And, obviously, I think if Abu Sama doesn't have the game that he did have, you're looking at Beck to throw it a little bit more, kind of like how Will Howard on the other side was forced to throw it 48 times, which blows my mind still to this day. But yeah, Rocco, just another efficient game from him. And I'm looking forward to see what he does in this bowl game, especially with Abu having this kind of performance, and really just to see if they can repeat it without the snow.
Yeah, and the snow honestly didn't even seem like as much of an issue as I thought it would be. Obviously, keeping the ball out of the air, it really came up a lot on like the defensive end of the ball.
Yeah.
It really seemed like there were a lot of plays that kind of fell through on the defense, and Kansas State got a lot more opportunities against Iowa State's defense because of the snow, maybe the limited visibility, maybe it being more difficult to catch balls that you're not expecting to come at you. So
I think you really saw it on both sides, so I'm glad you bring that up. And I've been listening to podcasts talking about it and just rewatching the game and football knowledge in general. It's obvious when what the big thing was is they missed that when you miss that first big tackle with the speed that both sides really have, you're able to get that run after catch or run after contact. And that was really what hurt both sides, is that the snow would stop them from really having the most mobility, find their footing in that tackle. You saw it a lot of times with Iowa State and Kansas State that they could just not find their footing and they just had to lunge themselves.
Yeah.
And I mean, I want to say that there was at least a combined 12 broken tackles or missed tackles in this game.
Mm-hmm. There was one play that stuck out to me that I know that I tweeted out there was 3 of Iowa State's probably best defense players. I mean, was it Bo Freeler, TJ Tampa? I don't think it was Gary Vaughn. I think it was Cooper. Yeah. All 3 of them missed tackles on one play, which very rare that any of them missed tackles at all. But for all 3 of them to miss it on a singular play just really spoke to how much the snow actually affected the defense.
Yeah. And you talk about guys like Gary Vaughn. I mean, they were making plays when they needed to. Gary Vaughn with that interception.
The only interception, actually.
Yeah. That didn't exactly it didn't seal the deal, but it was a huge momentum shift because Iowa State had the lead at that point, I want to say. And they didn't score after that interception. They might have given the ball, but they gave the ball back to Kansas State, and that's when they went on that long drive, which goes into, I mean, they get in the red zone, and you have guys like Miles Purchase, and someone had a good tackle for loss. The play calling for Kansas State, I'm not going to lie, late in the game was kind of made you scratch your head because they ran it with Will Howard a couple too many times on that drive. So it was just kind of interesting. But you had some guys definitely step up later in the game as opposed to earlier when they were just giving up touchdown drives as much as Kansas State was.
Yeah. You speak about guys stepping up. I think, honestly, where the defense stepped up all day long was the red zone. I think most of the times they actually kept Kansas State, scoreless or to a, a field goal early on was on those red zone plays where they couldn't get much going. And I know they scored 35 points, but I'm honestly that last stop there that kind of won them the game was huge in my mind.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm just looking back at Kansas State's last couple of drives. First of all, the third quarter went punt from Kansas State, and then touchdown Iowa State, touchdown K-State, touchdown Iowa State, touchdown K-State, touchdown Iowa State. I mean, and then you're tied at 35 with, what did I say, over 8 minutes? No, you have 12 minutes left. 12 minutes left, tied at 35. You think, Kansas State's going to go down and get a drive, keep it going. Kansas State in their last 3 drives goes punt, interception, downs. That's just them stepping up all over the place. Not even just, in that red zone, which, you praised a lot. And they've honestly done a really good job of this season. But I think for Gary Vaughn to get an interception 2 plays into a drive where, Iowa State gets a touchdown and take the lead, I think that's big. And then, you talk about that red zone defense coming in handy on that last drive. The guy that really stepped up, and he stepped up all night playing great coverage, which was surprising to me because someone that has kind of struggled to could find consistent time on the field and make big plays instead of giving up big plays is Miles Purchase, who had 4 pass breakups in this game. I'll get more on that later, but he gets a pass breakup in the end zone on the last play of Kansas State on offense. You saw the emotion from him. We heard the emotion from the coaches that were in the room across the other end of the press box. You kind of just heard all that and really just sealed the deal. And yeah, you said it perfectly. The defense stepped up late in the game when Iowa State needed it the most.
It's actually funny you mentioned the coaches. Going on a small tangent here, we were in the press box. We were right next to the room where they had like Nate Scheelhaus, the positional coaches, pretty much everybody but John Heacock and Matt Campbell.
Yeah.
So when they were coming back, it was, you talk about the 2 touchdowns there. Those were huge plays. That room to the right exploded.
Yeah. Forcing
a punt, getting an interception. It was just constant energy from there. And I think, honestly, that energy almost bled to the field. And you could see that they knew they were pulling off a huge upset. When Purchase got that last defensive stop, that was it. They were, yeah.
And it's almost interesting, or it's just really interesting for us to see that because, obviously we don't really get to see the emotions and everything, but you really got to hear and see the emotions. I'm looking over across the glass. They're banging on the glass. You just see how excited the coaches get in a big win like that. I don't know who was more excited, the players after the win or the coaches. And the players, the press conference, were hearing songs in the locker room such as Party in the USA and Ski Yee. I mean, it looked like they were having a great time in that locker room. But one thing, we can move on to our weird stats of the week. I talked about Miles Purchase's 4 pass breakups, very clutch throughout the entire game. So he had 4 pass breakups, which puts him now up to, I want to say, and I'm assuming I'll confirm this, leads the team with 12 pass breakups this season. Coming into this year, he had 4 in his first 2 seasons.
Yeah.
That's just crazy to me. I'm going to look at that.
So he got the same amount of pass breakups in that single game than he did in his first 2 seasons.
Combined. Yeah. And let's just look at
crazy.
Pass breakups. Yeah, he has 12 pass breakups on the year. No interceptions, but he's clutched up a lot of times. The closest is Jeremiah Cooper with 9, who missed 2 games.
2 games, yes.
That's crazy to me. And that is my crazy stat of the week. Miles Purchase just going off, kind of sliding into that cornerback role that, you thought coming into the year he was going to kind of solidify that role. But, yeah, he's going to be thinking to himself, let me purchase some more pass breakups.
Okay. Calm down there. I think, so my weird stat of the week, which, I mean, this is crazy. I know we told Rocco after the game, and he didn't believe it. That's how weird the stat is.
Yeah.
Iowa State, they put up 42 points, 35 plays. 0 plays in the red zone. They didn't take a single snap in the red zone, and they put up 42 points. They ran 35 plays in the game and scored 42 points, which is 1.2 points per play. Every time they snapped the ball, they were getting a point on the board. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That just does not happen. I know somebody told Rocco that. He was like, "Really? I did not know that. That's crazy." I'm like, that's crazy.
It is crazy, Rocco, and it just helped them out so much because it felt like and we've seen this all season when they've had big plays in moments. That's how they've scored a good amount of their touchdowns. Is like you have these drives that are 3 plays, 80 yards, whatever it is, 5 plays, 70 yards. So they really just took advantage of that, and they have been pretty successful in the red zone for the most part in Big 12 play.
Yeah, I think they were, or at least before the Texas game, they had scored every time they were in the red zone.
Right.
Which it helps that you have Chase Contreras, but still, that's also kind of a crazy stat.
And they protected Chase Contreras well, didn't have any of his PATs blocked, which, helped them out still being in that game. And yeah, just shout out Chase Contreras for nailing what would it have been, 6 PATs? And he's been awesome.
Yeah.
But those are the weird stats of the week. And what a great way to end the regular season with those stats. Again, just shout out Miles Purchase locking down the Wildcats throughout the entire game, and especially on that last play.
Mm-hmm. And shout out Rocco Becht for being surprised, giving us something to talk about. And enough with the Kansas State talk. We can talk all day about just how electric that game was. It was just incredible to watch. And
shout out to the people at Kansas State and the athletic department. Very nice people. Helped us find everything, and
salt to the earth.
It's helped us out a lot, even with the snow. And yeah, just great people. So if you're ever wanting to visit a university, I will give my stamp of approval to go visit Kansas State, at least a little bit that we got to see.
Yeah, for sure. And then moving on to maybe a little bit of duller talk here. Going to get a little grim. We're going to talk transfer portal because that opens up next week. But even though it opens up next week, we've already got a handful of names that are already in it. And I think we already expected the running backs to enter their names. The first one to actually put his name in, or at least the first one that I saw announced was Deshaun Hanukkah, who tight end. He had a good amount of use last year. Then he was one of those guys that got caught up in the whole gambling investigation, sat out this year, and has now announced that he's transferring.
And if you follow him on Twitter, he's gotten a decent amount of offers. So I think he will end up at a program for sure. And for a good reason. He was a really solid tight end when he played last year. He's got good size and length and made some plays on the ball. I think he had a couple touchdowns from Deckers last year. So, good for him, having that a couple more years of eligibility and whatnot. For those that don't know about the transfer portal, I believe you can enter your name at any point in the season, but you can announce you're doing it, but it's not until we're recording this Tuesday, November 28th. So Tuesday, November 4th.
I think it's Monday, or that Monday, December 4th.
Whichever day it is when you can when your name is officially in the transfer portal and you can start actually transferring places. But you can get offers right now like Deshaun Hanukkah's got. And yeah, I think he's going to end up at a pretty solid place next year. Like I say, he was a great tight end for Iowa State last year. But yeah, moving on, the running backs as well, Cartavius and Eli Sanders. Probably, if you would have told me a month ago, I would have been a little shocked. But after what we heard in press conferences and social media a couple days, or really the day before the game against Kansas State, I was not shocked at all that this is what ended up happening.
Yeah, we heard from people that, and obviously no confirmed sources, but yeah, we knew they weren't traveling with the team. We knew that their lockers were probably getting cleaned out sooner than expected. I think, I don't know if it was just their frustration. I don't think there was really anything keeping them here, as Norton's from Georgia and Sanders is from California, so it's not like they're really hometown kids. But I mean, and even to clarify more about the transfer portal, it is the athlete's decision to enter. So, the head coach really, or any of the coaching staff, doesn't really have a say whether or not to keep them. So I think that might have gone into the decision of not to play them against Kansas State. Once Campbell knew. Campbell knew they were entering the transfer portal.
Yeah.
He mentioned after the game, we asked him if transfer portal was on their mind. He said he would imagine so, that it was up to them to decide what they were going to do. So that pretty much is probably the clearest answer Campbell could have given about that situation, that, Norton and Sanders were gone.
And, for Hanukkah, it's a different situation because he had to sit out this whole last year. So the offers are from schools like South Dakota,
he had
Texas.
Some good offer. Houston sticks out, and Western Kentucky?
Eastern Kentucky. I think one of the Kentuckys. One of the sides of them. But, a different situation for Eli and Cartavius, who, they have more film. They're going to be getting some pretty solid offers, or at least they should be. And I think all power to them. Anyone that really enters the transfer portal, you are don't listen to anyone that is saying, oh, you're not sticking to what you committed. I think if you're an athlete, your goal is to make it to the pro level, and whatever you need to do to get there, if you don't like your situation and you don't think you're going to have success, then like you said, it's ultimately up to the athlete to make that decision to go to another program. And I think there's been I'm just going to throw some names out. These are just greats, but Kyler Murray transferred from A&M to Oklahoma. Baker Mayfield transferred from Tech to Oklahoma. You've got Joe Burrow transferred from Ohio State to LSU. You have these players.
Jaden Higgins transferred from Eastern Kentucky to Iowa State.
Exactly. And you've had Xavier Hutchinson went to I want to say a community college or a lower level college, and then went to Iowa State, and he's in the NFL now. So, you can talk as much as you want about players, giving them hate for wanting to get out of a program, but you have to look at how excited you also get when you get a player from another program that ends up doing well for you. So all power to the players that feel comfortable enough to do that. And it's a personal journey. You have to go to another new environment. So good luck to all those guys. And like I said, I think they're all going to end up in good spots, especially the two running backs.
And then the last two that announced were Travion McGee, a defensive back, and Greg Gaines, wide receiver. So two guys that didn't really see much playtime here, and you're kind of thinking with a lot of these guys, they see some people, maybe the running backs started seeing Sama get more of the attention, and they kind of want to put their best interests forward, and if they know they're not going to get playtime, if they know they're not going to see the field as much, it'd be better for them to move on to a different school that will use them more. And I think that is one of the benefits of the transfer portal, is helping some of these kids actually get more opportunities.
Yeah, and you need that because, you want to see that from these guys. They're not just going to sit there and, waste their time on a roster and just not really try that hard in practice because they know they're not going to play. These are guys that are fighting for spots. These are guys with 2-3 years of eligibility left. They're just putting a lot of trust in themselves, and you can't hate them for that at all.
Yeah, not one bit. And I know I heard a good amount from Travion McGee or about him, and yeah, these are actual talented players, and I'm sure they'll find success wherever they go. So. And
I think in their messages when they say, thanks to Iowa State, they still got to be a part of the program and whatnot. And I'm sure, I've seen on social media, they've made friends through the team and whatnot, and all the teammates, it's no hate, just supporting them through their journey. And yeah, just again, like you said, these are talented players that they are putting a lot of trust in themselves, and they want to go out and earn a spot. And if they feel like they need to go somewhere else to do that, then they should be able to do that. And I'm glad that they are doing that.
Yep. And that's college football for you. I mean, things change. You can't expect the same team. This isn't the NFL. You can't expect these guys to play out a 4-year contract. It changes way more.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
This will just happen. And another thing in college football is bowl games. we'll kind of sandwich the content. Cheery, a little bit glum, cheery. So, just to finish things off, obviously, bowl games get announced Sunday. So we'll be here next week talking about what bowl game we're going to be attending. Mm-hmm. But I mean, right now we can go over some predictions, just a few. I know me personally, if I'm picking one that I want to go to, I'm picking one that's close by and in a place that I'm not going to have to wear like 17 layers.
Yeah, you were, and especially with us being Iowa guys, you know, if we're going to travel somewhere over winter break, it would be awesome to go somewhere warm. The projections that I've been seeing throughout the year, I'm seeing right now, December 23rd, this from CBS, the Armed Forces Bowl against Louisiana Lafayette in Fort Worth, Texas. So I'm sure Christian and I wouldn't mind spending a couple days down in Fort Worth. Maybe the coldest it gets is high 60s. So, and actually it'd be a little bit of a storybook ending for me personally, because my freshman year was the 2020 season. Their first game of the year was against
where they lost to
Louisiana. They're supposed to beat them by a lot, and they got upset, ended up winning the Fiesta Bowl. But that'd be a little storybook ending for me. My last game for Iowa State would be a team that, you know, I'm watching that in my dorm room with my buddies, and they lose to Louisiana Lafayette, and I think we are going to waste Brock Purdy and Breece Hall, but that's neither here nor there.
Good thing that did not happen.
Yeah, that. So there's that, and then from Fox, I saw another one that I will command F real quick.
And I think it would be good to face a team like Louisiana. I think Iowa State's. Ooh,
that's a tough one.
We'll talk about that in a second. I think Iowa State will benefit from a team that I don't want to say is going to be an easy matchup, but somebody that's not going to be just a super hard challenge, especially if you're kind of expecting maybe one or two players to sit back and prepare for the draft.
And I would certainly like to see that better than what Fox Sports has us at, which is in the Independence Bowl against Oregon State.
Yeah, and Oregon State is a really good team.
Yeah,
I've been high up on Oregon State all year.
It would be actually the second time that Iowa State, the second time in the last 3 years that Iowa State would be going up against DJ. Hope I say this right. Ungalungale.
Close enough.
In a bowl game, because I believe that was his last year at Clemson was the Cheez-It Bowl. So I mean, but Iowa State would. We said this about Kansas State, so I could be wrong, but they would probably get smacked in that bowl. And it would also kind of suck because looking at the date, that's at December 16th, which is the day after finals week is over. And I really don't know what my schedule is looking like yet. So if I have to miss class on Friday or Thursday, that would not be ideal. Also, it depends on where that Independence Bowl is at.
Yeah.
So.
And I know, I mean, it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world to face a really good team like Oregon State.
Yeah.
But yeah, I also think that would they'd probably get gapped pretty hard.
And looks like that's in Louisiana, so not terrible. And now I'm looking at something from USA Today. Again, another Command F for Iowa State. And they're not on here for some reason.
That's good.
Yes, sir. Again, they have Iowa State against Louisiana Lafayette.
The day after Christmas.
So
that'd be tough.
Also not ideal. But that's just something that we're going to have to deal with as sports writers, is that we may have to miss Christmas or duck out of Christmas early so that we could go to this would be the First Responder Bowl.
Hold, please.
The First Responder Bowl, which is in University Park, Texas. So
another Texas.
It looks like we are most likely heading south. I've also heard the Liberty Bowl, which wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, I've also seen that.
That would be December 29th, I believe, against Memphis in Memphis, Tennessee. So what could be a little bit of a home game, but I'm really excited to just see where they end up. The bowl games will come out on Sunday, Christian and I can start planning, and hopefully you will get a lot of content from us out there. Or at least I'm prepared to do that, because very exciting in a spot where almost nobody thought that they were going to be able to make this.
I did not think they would,
unless you read my predictions, which had them at 7-5. But it's neither here nor there.
Yeah,
I'm just very excited to see what happens with this team, and we will know more on Sunday. But as far as where we would like to go, heading down south would be ideal.
Yeah, would not mind that. So I think all we can really do is just wait for that to come out, and then we can start deep diving into the bowl, who Iowa State's playing, all that jazz. So we will see you next week when we talk a little bit more about that bowl game. Thank you for watching.